So, welcome to our Earth Day event, Nature and Societal Reset in the age of COVID-19. And we would like to thank our supporters, the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. My name is Kevin Bloom. I am an environmental journalist focusing on environmental investigations with Our Burning Planet. And our guests today, Linda Tucker and Rutendo Ngara, sit very much on the interface between science and indigenous wisdom. A bit more about Linda Tucker, who's joining us from the White Lion Heartlands in Timbavati. Linda is a globally acclaimed lion conservationist. She is one of the only, if not the only, Linda, if you can correct me, human beings who have ever successfully rewilded the white lions. Linda is the author of several books, the most famous one being Mystery of the White Lions. And Linda is also a initiated Sangoma in the African indigenous wisdom tradition. It is also the death day of Maria Corsa. Rutendo Ngara is the chair of the Credo Mutwa Foundation. She holds a number of postgraduate degrees, many of them in the natural sciences, one of them in the biomedical field. And Rutendo's focus is, again, very much on the interface between science and indigenous wisdom, mapping the cosmologies of the various indigenous wisdom traditions against what the natural sciences are telling us. So to jump into the first topic for today, this is pretty much the first Earth Day ever where we're seeing nature reclaiming her dominion. We're seeing levels of pollution in the skies lower than they've been in decades. We're seeing our waters beginning to clear up. We're seeing the return of our marine wildlife. We're seeing soils regenerate. And the question is, what does this say about the resilience of nature? What is this teaching us about how, as humanity, we seem to be living in imbalance, about how we seem to be taking more than our fair share? How do we learn from this? What is the invitation? Linda, if we could start.
Thank you, Kevin. I am speaking to you and everyone from the heart of White Lion ancestral territories. So if my voice...
You're back. Okay.
Yeah, if my voice fades, I'm going to cut my image and just speak to you. So you can indicate if I need to do that. We're in the middle of the bushveld here. Just if you put your hand up, if my signal is poor. Just to address, first of all, yes, we pioneered the reintroduction of the white lions to their ancestral homelands, an ancient sacred site, which was declared a sacred site hundreds of years before Kruger National Park was proclaimed South Africa's national park. There have been other people who have taken white lions into various degrees of captivity, and some have released them into various degrees of wildness for commercial purposes. Our project is committed to the best interests of the lions, recognizing that they have been born in a specific place for a specific reason, for such is the intentionality of nature. So just to clarify that point.
Thank you, Linda. And if you could perhaps just speak a bit more about the resilience of nature, your background, your experience as a conservationist you will be very steeped in nature's strength, living out there in Timbavati and having, as you say, successfully rewilded the lions. What is the message in what we're seeing today?
Okay, well, resilience is the key quality of nature. If we just look at the white lions as a radiant example of this, they've been forcibly removed from their natural kingdom over a documented period of 6 decades, through trophy hunting, through extraction into zoos and circuses, and the notorious cuddle to kill death camps in South Africa. And yet, after all this, they keep recurring in their place of origin because there's a reason for their occurrence that indicates a higher intention than anything humanity can interfere with. So that gives you an example of resilience in the face of incredible odds. I'd like to refer us back to your word dominion. It's such an important word. You say, under the present circumstances with COVID-19, showing us a new way of being, nature has taken dominion. Now, that word dominion really refers to sovereignty or control. And of course, nature fundamentally has always had control because this is a divine inheritance, which we as humans are intended to respectfully steward. Of course, we've done the reverse. We've been highly disrespectful. We have not stewarded this sacred heritage. We have virtually nothing to hand over to future generations. So we have, attempted to take control over nature. And as you rightly point out, this is one of those moments of pure hush where we look nature in the face and recognize who fundamentally, holds the power card. Now, just to before I hand over to Rutendo on this issue, if we say nature's taken dominion, nature certainly hasn't yet taken dominion in a way that is destructive for humanity. If you think the most recent fatality records of the World Health Organization indicate that there have been around 200,000 fatalities through the coronavirus. Well, bear in mind that in 2004, that one tsunami in Indonesia with one great wave took out more than that in a couple of hours. Likewise, the Haiti earthquake in 2010 removed more than that within a couple of hours. And I believe that there's a tsunami heading for Japan right now that could be more serious than the Fukushima event of 2011 with all the radioactive fallout. What I'm getting to is that we haven't begun to see nature's dominion yet. And this is actually a beautiful opportunity for learning, for humanity to, go within and learn really graciously the lessons that humanity is capable of learning through nature's guidance, lessons of respect, lessons of community, lessons of understanding what it means to be confined, because after all, we've confined virtually every animal into the most inhumane conditions. So this is a monumental learning initiation experience for humanity at large, and reminding us that every issue today is a global issue. I hand over to Rutendo, if I might, because this is a depth issue of initiation, which she understands as an initiate.
Absolutely, Linda. Thank you very much. And if I could ask you, it's wonderful that we're able to connect with you down there in Timbavati, but perhaps just to save on the bandwidth, if you could, yeah, exactly. Thank you. And on to you, Rutendo. from the perspective of indigenous wisdom, I mean, we know that Baba Credo had been talking about an event like this for years. He had foreseen it in various ways. He had been articulating what indigenous wisdom has known since, almost the beginning of time, that if we are out of balance with nature, if we are taking more than our fair share, then nature is going to come back, because we are not apart from nature. We are part of it. From within Baba Credo's cosmology, from within Baba Credo's prophecy, how do we make sense of what's happening on this Earth Day?
Thank you very much, Kevin, and thank you to all our viewers and listeners for joining us on this Earth Day. Perhaps I should begin with the etymology of the word nature from an African indigenous perspective. And let us go back to Kemet, or ancient Egypt, where we have the concept of neter, which if you abbreviate it as NTR. And neter is all that is. It is the undefined, it is the formless, it is the nothingness that is at the same time the underlying factor of all the objects of the world. Now, this has found itself into the Latin of natura, or neutral, or eternitas, and therefore that's where the word nature comes from. It is all that is. And we're a part of all that is. And let me bring in two concepts from African indigenous wisdom, which are part of what neter is, part of all that is. And these are two sacred laws, which are one and the same, but just have different manifestations depending on where you're coming from. The first is the sacred law of Ma'at, if we are still if we still find ourselves in ancient Egypt or in Kemet. And this tells us about the interdependence, the interconnectedness, and the interrelatedness of everything. We are interrelated, interconnected, and interdependent with everything. And that is what truth is, and that is what love is. And with this global crisis, this planetary crisis, this cosmic crisis that we're in at the moment, we're being pushed into understanding interconnectedness, interrelatedness, and interdependence, because simply by being, in relation with each other, we can catch the virus, So we're being shown how much we have been breaking the law of Ma'at in our actions as humans, seeking domination as opposed to dominion over nature. And I think the ancient Bushmen, elders, the Khoisan will tell us that we do not own the land. We belong to the land. We are a part of the land. We are a part of nature. And coming back down to our Bantu cosmology, let's unpack a little bit the concept of Ubuntu, which of course is very well known across the world. And this is an aspect of what Ma'at is from ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. And Ubuntu, firstly, we need to look at the root of the word Untu, which might be called Nu in Shona or Tu in Sutu, which gives us the underlying cosmology framing what Ubuntu is. Untu is the causative, dynamic life force or power responsible for all of creation on Earth and in the universe. And here on Earth Day, this is what Untu is. We've also got in Venda an aspect of that, which is Mupo, which we hear from the Makazis there as this all-pervasive concept, this all-pervasive force that we're all a part of. Now, linking it back to Ma'at, which tells us about the interrelatedness, interconnectedness, and interdependence of all that is. Untu has four main aspects. The first is Muntu, or Bantu, and which is basically, it is reasoned beings. So it is humans who have the reason, the ability to reason, and in this case, who have unfortunately been reasoning in seeking domination over the earth, but who also have the capacity for reason in seeking true dominion and sovereignty over that which we've been given. And interestingly enough, according to ancient African wisdom, Muntu also indicates trees. Trees are also a part of Muntu because trees carry the ancestors. And we forever have to be conscious of the ancestors, those that have walked before us, but also those that are to come. When we are looking into how we are being in nature, how we're seeking dominion within nature. Next aspect of Ntu or Ubuntu is Kintu, which is unreasoned things or unreasoned beings. And this is that which can be acted on by the Muntu or the Bantu, by the beings, by the people. It's all things that are inanimate, but which also have a life force because Ntu traverses through them. So that includes our rivers, it includes our mountains, it includes the earth, it includes all that which we have been destroying when we have not been seeking dominion, but we have instead been seeking domination. We've been looking into what humans desire, but not into what, the earth desires. The other aspect of Ubuntu is Hantu, which denotes time and space. And these are collapsed into one. And quantum physics will very easily tell us the time of the time-space continuum. Ancient indigenous wisdom has already told us in the concept of Hantu that time and space are a part of Ubuntu, and therefore this time and this space that we're in at the moment has been predestined, as we have spoken about the predictions that have come from sages such as the great legendary late Vusamazulu Credo Mutwa. And then finally, another aspect of Ubuntu is Kuntu, and Kuntu denotes a modality, such as beauty. And right now, as you've rightly said in the beginning, we're being brought into a space where we can start to see the beauty of nature again, because it is restoring itself. It is seeking the removal of the great impact of humanity, which unfortunately has not necessarily led it into the ecosystem, into its greatest being. But by simply removing the great impact that we're having, we're being able to come into this aspect of Ubuntu, which is to see the beauty that is before us, that is the earth before us. And this global crisis that we're in, this global lockdown, this COVID-19, the coronavirus, and it's interesting that it has a crown. It's interesting just the naming of the virus is really bringing us into reflection and questioning as to how have we as humans been observing Ma'at, and how have we as humans been observing Ubuntu, and how has this been impacting the earth? And how is it that the earth is now teaching us and showing us through what we are facing today, what it means to truly live in Ma'at and Ubuntu?
Thank you so much for those profound words, Gogo Rutendo. And coming back to you, Gogo Linda, I can't help myself using this honorific Gogo. You are indeed both high initiates, and one does need to show that respect. But, moving again from the indigenous wisdom into the science. So COVID-19, we know, conspiracy theories aside, is a zoonotic disease, which means that it's transmitted from animals to humans or from wildlife to humans. And what we've seen since the early 1960s is a rise in these zoonotic diseases, which have directly tracked the destruction of our wetlands and our grasslands and our forests, generally our ecosystems. And science is very clear about the fact that we're going to see these transmissions of diseases from animals to humans unless we get the lesson. So again, to you, Gogo Linda, as wearing your hat as a conservationist, as an environmentalist, but talk a bit more about the lion bone trade, which is just so incredibly hard to fathom, especially in the context of the fact that the South African government seems to be okay with the fact that this is legally protected. This trade is actually protected by the South African government. Linda, we seem to have a problem with your connection. I wonder if we could go back to you, Gogo Rutendo, while we're waiting for Linda to come back onto that question.
Thank you very much, Kevin. So I think Linda is far more qualified to speak about the lion bone trade, but perhaps just going into the resurgence of zoonotic diseases and going back into the concept of Ubuntu, how we as humans have othered animals to the large extent. And we have lost our ability to know how to be in right relationship with the natural world, including the animals that are a part of them. Whether it is in the ways that we zoo them, or just our inability to completely connect. Now, in African ancient and current African wisdom, we have the concept of totems, for example, where totems, for instance, my particular totem is the zebra, and where totems are, have been an integral part of African cosmology and African societal structures, so that we learn and we know how to live in right relationship with the beings that are a part of nature. Now, I would surmise that the rise of zoonotic diseases has in many ways been a function of the fact that we have lost that right relationship. We have lost the ability to know how to interact with the elephant or with the lion or with the python or with the eagle or with the whale or with the tiny bird or the worm or the bee or the butterfly. Or the pangolin in the case of COVID-19. We have sought instead to want to use them for trade. We have sought instead to seek them as the bottom of the food chain, as part of what humans consume, and we have forgotten to listen to their wisdom. We have forgotten to listen to what it is that they're here to teach us. And perhaps if we were to go back into the ways of the ancient ones, if we see how our Bushman elders, our First Nations elders lived in harmony and right relationship with animals, would perhaps see that zoonotic diseases were not a part of their reality.
Thank you very much for that, Gogo. We seem to still be having problems with Linda. We have a question here from our friend Puvan Mudli from Natural Justice, who is asking Linda, please share what the Asagaya Alliance is and how people here can contribute to the initiative. So while we're waiting for Linda to come back, I did want to get onto this question, but just to refer to a gathering that we had in the Timbavati White Lion Heartlands last August. You were there, Gogo, and so was Puvan from Natural Justice. It was a gathering of environmental lawyers, environmental activists, scientists, and indigenous healers from South Africa and from around the world. Europeans, South Americans, North Americans, many indigenous wisdom traditions were represented there. What it was essentially about, what this Asagaya Alliance is about, and it's called the Asagaya Alliance. It's named for the alpha male in the white lion pride in the Timbavati Heartlands. It's about the protection of sacred sites, and based on the deep wisdom that these sacred sites are chosen by nature, they're not chosen by man. Around the world, what we see in indigenous wisdom traditions is the protection of these sites, is ceremony being held at these sites at specific times of that watersheds, so the whole ecosystem would be destroyed. the White Lion heartlands themselves. Timbavati is one of these sacred sites. It's the core of the ecosystem in the Kruger to Canyons biosphere. Another key sacred site is Lake Fundudzi and the Taitavunde forest in the Soutpansberg. And Gogo, you and I did a trip there 2 years ago, but what had subsequently come up, and referring again to the word mupo, we'll come back to it, which means nature in Venda. But what had come up after this Asagaya Alliance had been formed is we got word at Our Burning Planet that an illegal prospecting license had been given to a man. I mean, his name's there in the article. There's no point in repeating it, but he was given an illegal prospecting license in this region, and it was illegal for 3 reasons. It was illegal because it's in a national heritage site. It was illegal because there was no EIA done, no environmental impact assessment, and it's illegal because the ancestral claimants to the land were not properly informed. And so after this article was published, we managed to work with Zomo la Mupo, which is a local activist group based in Venda that is all about the protection of these sacred sites. So they take care of 11 sacred sites, and each a specific clan. And what Zomo la Mupo managed to do was to speak to 71 chiefs, I think it was, from the district, to tell them that this illegal prospecting license had been given. And once they had that information, so they formed a coherent unit and a coherent body to say there's not going to be any mining here, because nobody in that region needed ecologists to tell them that if Lake Fundudzi and the Taitavunde forest was destroyed, that the entire ecosystem would be destroyed. And Gogo, Rutendo, I know you were close to that story, and for me, this was a confirmation of how sacred sites could be protected and why they needed to be protected, and the fact that beneath or around or inside the ceremonies is the simple fact that just sharing this sort of information stops these things from happening. So, Gogo, I wonder if you could talk about your own experience of the Asagaya Alliance and the importance of sacred sites.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I think I'll begin with an anecdote. Some years ago, I was in Zimbabwe, and at the time that I traveled around the country, there was a national shutdown due to, obviously, the economic system in the country was at such a level that the whole country had decided to shut down in protest. I happened to be at a sacred site in Zimbabwe, which is on the Kasamabezi River, or what has been adulterated as the Zambezi River, where the Tonga people are, and those are the custodians of what is the sacred being of the Zambezi River, the Nyami Nyami, who in the building of Lake Kariba in, I think, the 1950s, 1960s, were evicted from their custodianship and stewardship roles from that particular sacred river and that sacred site. And there are many sacred sites around it, sacred springs, etc., around the site. Now, I happened to be with an elder, an indigenous elder there, and during this national lockdown, and I asked him, why do you think it is that that the country is in turmoil today? And he had an interesting answer. He said, it's because the elephants no longer pass by and give us messages. and because we as elders are no longer allowed to go to the sacred sites to do ceremony. Now, obviously, in our Western paradigm, the idea of causality from where elephants passing by and, elders not being able to do ceremony at sacred sites would lead to economic shutdown and national mayhem. It does not see the link. But that is perhaps because our Western paradigm that is dominant at the moment has lost a lot. There's a lot that it has failed to see. It has become blinded to, which actually, if we go back before the invention of the clock, 13th century Europe, humans were seen as midwives to nature. And once the clock, came into being, suddenly time could be controlled. It could be wasted, it could be rushed. And with that, then became the age of enlightenment and everything else, industrialization that happened, leading into the reasoned Western paradigm that we find ourselves in which we're not a part of nature, but we're apart from nature as these dominators, as opposed to those who are who have dominion. But when we go into quantum physics, and those who dare to go into quantum physics, we begin to see, that what indigenous wisdom has known all along. As I mentioned earlier, the concept of Hantu, time-space continuum. Quantum physics, when we move away from a mechanistic view of the world, we'll start being able to see those connections between how elephants not being able to pass by and elders not being able to do ceremony at sacred sites, that this would cause political, social mayhem in a country, or as we've seen it now in the world. So what are actually sacred sites? And, why did we then meet in order to form the Asagaya Alliance? Sacred sites we can see as portals or as hotspots, on the planet, which are mediums between that which exists in the deepest recesses of the earth and that which exists in the cosmos with the stars. And they are a medium or a portal through which information, energy, wisdom, whatever it is that is needed to keep the planet not only in right relationship with itself, in right relationship with the beings that exist on it, but keeping the planet in right relationship with the rest of the solar system and the rest of the universe and the rest of the cosmos. And our indigenous elders from time immemorial have either built monuments around these sacred sites, and we can think of maybe something like the Great Pyramids of Giza. We can think of Great Zimbabwe in Zimbabwe. We can think of countless sacred sites around the world, or they have sought to keep them in their natural form, such as a place like Tatevondo or Mount Shasta, and keep them in their natural forms, that they can be as pure as possible in order to service the planet. And service the beings on the planet, and that's all beings, not just human beings, and service the planet in its right relationship with the rest of the cosmos. Now, as I've said, it requires a paradigm shift out of the dominant Western paradigm in order to be able to see and feel the connections, which the concept of Ma'at, which talks about the interrelatedness, interdependence, and interconnectedness of all things, would tell us in terms of how these sacred sites play such an incredible role in terms of creating a lattice, or creating a network, or creating vortices of a network of protection for the planet. COVID-19 and the removal of humans from a lot of the destruction they have been doing upon the planet has given is giving these sacred sites a potential and opportunity to start restoring, so that they can start doing the work that they have been doing from time immemorial, since the beginning of the creation of this particular planet that we are blessed to be a part of.
Again, thank you, Gogo. I mean, those words just, they go so deep. The implications are almost fathomless. We have a question here from Nita Morar, which I think encapsulates a lot of what we're talking about here. She says, great discussion. How may we all use this COVID-19 experience to strategize to heal the earth, especially when lockdown ends? Is there a global movement to implement strategies? So, just to pick up on where you left off, there seem to be efforts at a global movement, and this Asagaya Alliance, this effort to protect sacred sites is certainly one of those movements. It has the interest, if not yet the backing, of UNESCO. We are hoping that UNESCO will back this. It has the backing of many indigenous groups around the world. It has the backing of environmental lawyers. It has the backing of environmental rights groups. But just to perhaps read between the lines of what Gogo Rutendo is saying, with a movement like this, it takes a lot of listening. It takes the ability to be quiet so that when we step into action, it's in we would take an action and as a collective, and it would end up having the wrong effect. And I've personally seen this coming out of NGOs from around the continent in the travels I've done through this continent with the best will in the world. Many NGOs, unfortunately, don't leave the countries that they work in a better place. And again, what seems to be asked of us right now is to listen. And it's great that lockdown, one of the upsides is we're being forced inwards. We're being forced into our own silence. And we're being forced to listen to that part of us that is below our ego, below the chattering mind, where nature does speak, and where high initiates like Gogo Rutendo and Gogo Linda, who unfortunately we seem to have lost, but high initiates like Linda Tucker and Rutendo Ngara do have communion with nature on the level that most human beings don't. And it's not necessarily about, I think we should do this or I think we should do that. It's not about opinion. It's about the fact that nature is speaking very loud right now, and is speaking very loud in these zoonotic diseases, and is speaking very loud in the at a rate and a scale that is pretty much unprecedented. Gogo, is there anything in there that resonates? Is there anything in there that you want to pick up on in relation to Nita's question, which is, how do we do this differently? How do we come out of this global pandemic? How do we come out of this unprecedented crisis with a different worldview, with a different internal view, with a different understanding of what we are and who we are and how we ultimately serve?
Thank you very much, Kevin. If I may quote an elder who many might be familiar with, that is Malidoma Somé, on the 4th on the 10th of this month of April, sent out a message, and I'll just quote a bit of what he says. He says, "The world is in an initiatory intensive at this time. And as with any initiation, the fear of the unknown is more deadly than what is known. At times like this, we must invoke our medicines, our collective gifts and imaginations to stomp the spread of fear and insecurity, and to read into the crisis that is plaguing the world from the perspective of our human genius and its capacity to respond to our turmoil wisely. We humans have asked for this initiatory moment for exactly this reason. We were otherwise too comfortable in our defiance of the obvious, the call to heal in the face of the redundancies we have sunken into." And I think before we think of any global movement, the movement we should be thinking about is the movement within. The movement within each and every one of us. And we have been forced into a space of inward reflection, of facing the demons that exist within us. We are locked, out behind, inside our walls, inside our small houses. But more than that, we're locked inside our own hearts. We're locked inside our own minds. We're locked inside our own souls without these distractions that we have become accustomed to. We have been pushed to go right down to basics, right down to basics. There are things you cannot go shopping for. There are things you cannot do. There are places you cannot go. We cannot even go out into nature if you do not have nature, if you're not privileged enough to have nature surrounding you in this time of lockdown. So for me, I'd say before we think of a global movement, we have to really look within and really interrogate the deepest recesses of our souls and our minds and see how are we in right relationship with ourselves, how are we in right relationships with our families, our communities, our society, our nations, and the world and nature at large. And from there, like a droplet, like a pebble, dropped into a pool of water, we then start to see the ripple effects. I believe this is a moment that, of course, it's unprecedented. It's a moment like no other. And in many ways, it's a gift. In many ways, it is a gift, in that we're really asked to reflect. We're really asked to come into a place of unity with self and back into the place of Ubuntu, which our Southern African cosmology tells us to, and into the place of Ma'at.
Thank you, Gogo Rutendo. Again, I mean, what a wonderful place to begin wrapping up. Malidoma Patrice Somé, his second book, The Healing Wisdom of Africa, couldn't come more highly recommended for the topics that we've been touching on today, and for the ability to learn to listen inwardly, for the movement inward, as Gogo Rutendo is saying. We have 5 minutes left. It looks like Gogo Linda has come back on. And in these last 5 minutes, Gogo Linda, if you could please talk about the Asagaya Alliance and the global movement to protect sacred sites from your perspective, being at the forefront of that, and how the 500 or so listeners that we have live now, and hopefully the thousands more that we're going to get when we put this up on YouTube, how do these listeners, how do these attendees, how do we contribute to this movement to protect our sacred natural sites?
Well, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Rutendo. Just please put your hand up if I'm disappearing, bearing in mind I'm literally speaking from the heart of White Lion ancestral territories. What a privilege. Yes, this is one of Earth's most important sacred natural sites, and it holds the codings for the recovery of our planet. It holds the higher plan, and the lions walk that plan back into existence because they are the spiritual guardians of the site. So it's an incredible privilege to be their protector. I just wanted to refer back for people to understand the way forward, that etymology that Rutendo took us through with these incredible words of Ubuntu and Bantu, that word tu, that is the life force in all of us. If we compare that with the etymology of trophy, which takes us back to atrophy, that is the Western model, the post-colonial model that is, turning our wildlife into trophies. And if you look at the synonyms there for trophy, wasting away, withering, shrinking, shriveling, drying up, decaying, that is the risk that we are imposing on our wildlife. And I have to say that our government seems hell-bent on that program, which has recently converted 32 species, including lions and cheetah, into farm animals, using the terminology of faunal biological resources. It's a completely different consciousness from the one that Rutendo is describing, which holds the indigenous consciousness of service to our planet. That consciousness is held by indigenous people worldwide, and actually the indigenous part of all of us. So to answer your question, how do we emerge from this? We need to go back to our indigenous natures, which is one of serving creation rather than destroying it. And that reestablishes right relationship and reestablishes the true consciousness of reverence. So we have on the one extreme sacred sites, and on the other extreme this contempt for our environment in various policies. And we actually have to educate our so-called authorities. Their way of dealing with our inheritance is unacceptable. And I'd like to end with the fact, with a reference to the lion bone trade, which is nothing short of diabolical. I've been opposing that for 3 decades. And in fact, in 2009, conservation groups, our leading conservation groups, EWT, WESA, the SPCA, these groups put a plan to government for the phasing out of this industry that turns the king of animals into a canned commodity to be consumed by humans against all the fundamental laws of nature. And more recently, the world experts warned our government, our Minister of the Environment, Edna Malewa at the time, that if consumption of lions continues, we are facing a global pandemic. That's on record. So, there is actually legal action pending from very responsible international environmental groups to South African authorities, saying if you don't deal with this issue, you are risking yet another global pandemic of much greater proportions. So I'm sorry to end on a critically urgent note, but we have links to petitions, global petitions, asking for the permanent shutting down of China's wet wildlife markets. We know that the most scientifically responsible research has traced the pandemic to the pangolin and its consumption by humans in these appalling markets, which bring living wildlife into desperately inhumane conditions and slaughter them there. There is no ecological rationale to do so. It is against all eco-logic. And I remind us all that there is no logic unless it's ecological for after all, this is our planet. So I know that we're going to be giving our listeners specific petitions that are well researched to consider supporting. And we do need to hold our government accountable for the lion bone trade, which simply cannot continue. There was a parliamentary resolution just over a year back, which I attended and presented at, which indicated that we would shut down this industry. Now it has to be done.
Strong words, Gogo Linda. Thank you so much. We've come to the end of this session, but it's certainly not going to be the end of this discussion and this topic. We're going to contribute to. I've been focusing on, in between the investigations, how indigenous wisdom and how the concept of sacred sites plays in to what we're facing. We're certainly going to be doing more of that. There have been comments below this webinar asking for more, and we will get that. Before we ring off, would like to ask you, please, to reach into your back pockets and to donate to our Maverick Insider program. This is what brings you the level of debate and investigative journalism and analysis that we're able to enjoy today with esteemed traditional healers, scientists, conservationists like Gogo Rutendo Ngara and Gogo Linda Tucker. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful Earth Day.